started with our party, our 10th birthday party for the Brooklyn College Listening Project. I'm Jessica Siegel, and I'm an emeritus professor of journalism, English, and education, and I taught at Brooklyn College for 18 years, and I'm back. Yeah. So I want to introduce Phil Napoli, who's the He's the dean of the School of Humanities and Social Sciences. He's going to welcome us all. He's an esteemed oral historian and historian. With me and Joseph Enton and Maddie Fox, who's here also, and Miguel Macias, got the Brooklyn College Listening Project up and running 10 years ago. So take it away, Phil.
Well, thank you, Jessica, very much. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, guys, for coming to talk to us about your experiences. I'm both grateful and, oh, you want me over here? Oh, because of the camera? Well, I'll start again and just say thank you one more time to everyone for coming. This has been a labor of love for those of us involved in it. For all these 10 years, we deeply believe in the power of empathic listening. That this matters in not only the lives of the people we talk to, but the students who get to learn about the process and benefit from it. So that's all I want to say, is that it's wonderful to be here. I'm real thrilled and kind of amazed that it's 10 years that we've been working together on this. This will last for a very long time, certainly as long as I'm at the college. We'll keep doing this work. It's a good project for us. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to the panel.
So we came here to celebrate the first decade of the Brooklyn College Listening Project. Hundreds of students, these are some examples of them. We estimate over 1,000 in those 10 years, have gone out with digital recorders or the cell phones and interviewed families, friends, neighbors, and strangers about their lives and about their perspectives on their own experiences in the world. 50 or more professors have taught their students oral history skills and created projects in their classes to encourage their students to be what we describe as creators of their own knowledge. Come join us. Excuse my, let's see if I can get this. Yeah. Let's see. I want to, okay. Where's the, in 2018 and 19, in response to the first Trump administration, we mounted a multimedia exhibition based on oral histories that our students conducted with immigrants, many of them from their own families, or children of immigrants, entitled "We Are Brooklyn Immigrant Voices." This gives you a sense of some of the people that they interviewed, as you can see. This exhibition, it was a chance for immigrants to have their stories told, and in doing so, talk back to the policies of the Trump administration. It toured the city, starting here and going to 6 different venues in Manhattan, the Bronx, and Brooklyn for a year and a half, which gave the opportunity for I don't know how many people to listen to and read about the stories of the people that Brooklyn College students interviewed. So you may ask, 10 years ago, how did the Listening Project come to be? In 2014, a group of faculty members, Phil, Maddie, Joseph Enton, Miguel Macias, and I, well, 4 of us answered a call from Professor Enton to start an oral history project. Why oral history? Well, there's a lot of great teaching and discussion that goes on at Brooklyn College in many classrooms, but oral history, sending students out to interview their families, to their own communities and other neighborhoods, puts the digging, the discovery, and the learning into the hands of students. And since it was Professor Enton who came up with the seed of this idea that's now sprouted over 10 years, I wanted him to come up and talk about the genesis of the Brooklyn College Listening Project.
I'm happy to do that. Thank you all so much for being here today, and thanks to everybody who's here. And before saying anything, I do really want to thank the Wolf Institute for the Humanities, and Kiana Benjamin, who's here today, and Gaston Alonso from the Wolf Institute. And just a thank you to everybody who's been involved in the Listening Project for so many years. So many people at the library. Franz Abrillo and Colin McDonald are here today. But so many other people in the library, Miriam Deutsch, Marianne Lobato, Colleen Brady Sanders, and so many faculty members have been involved in such a wide range of departments. At the first meetings that we had in 2014 and 2015, we got enthusiastic sponsorship from the person who was the Dean of Humanities and Social Sciences at the time, a guy named Richard Greenwald. And we had initial meetings of like 15, 20 faculty members who were interested in this and came out. And the Listening Project is not a research project. It's really a pedagogical project. And what it aims to do is to support faculty, to support their students. And so over the last decade, students from a whole range of different departments have gone out to interview people in music classes, Puerto Rican Latino studies classes, English composition classes, history classes, anthropology, Africana studies, you name it. And part of what has been exciting is to see the wide range of ways in which faculty have designed projects and the things that students have done with them. The central thing for me that the Listening Project is about is kind of flipping the educational script. And the university is set up so that students come and the university tends to think that they lack things that we have, and we'll give it to them. That's what education is about. Young people come to the university, or not so young people, because we have something that they don't have and we'll give it to them. And the Listening Project, I think, tries to challenge that idea and maybe even turn it on its head. And it suggests that actually a lot of the wisdom that we as a society need is actually in the hands of our students and the people that they know. And what if we gave them the opportunity to generate their own knowledge, to interview the people they know, to kind of try and collect some of the immense social brilliance and wisdom of people in New York. And that was the central idea. And I think it offers a different vision for the way that the university might actually work if we really put our students and their communities at the center and design the whole curriculum around them. And our students become researchers and become the experts. And they do that with the help of people from the community, which is what we're going to hear about today. So maybe I'll stop there. Is that okay? Turn it back to you, Jessica? All right, thanks.
The other website. I want to put the other website. Yeah, thanks. So, since students, and as Professor Anton said, and the people they interviewed at the heart of this project, I'd like to introduce you to the panel that we're so lucky to have. On the far left is Nadine Moore,
Nadia.
and her grandmother, did I get it wrong?
It's Nadia.
Nadia, sorry. Nadia Moore and her grandmother, Yvonne Moore. Next to her is Naomi Heimowitz, who was interviewed by Dylan Karlowski. And on the far right is Lena Maziri, whose mother unfortunately who interviewed her mother, her father, and her grandmother, and her grandfather in Algeria, but her mother can't be here, but she's here in her voice. So what we thought we would do since with this panel is that we first ask questions of the interviewers to see a little bit about what the experience was like for them and go back and forth between the interviewer and the interviewee. So, Nadia. So let's start with her. We'll move from left to right. What was the class you were doing this oral history for, and what was the assignment, and why did you decide to interview your grandma?
So the class that I did it for was for Professor Rajan Singh's class, Introduction to the Caribbean. And the project was to do an oral history assignment with an immigrant from a West Indian country. So my grandmother is an immigrant. She came from Trinidad, so she was like the first person I automatically thought of, especially because I lived with her.
Okay, Dylan, what was the class that you did this for, and what was the assignment, and then why did you decide to interview Naomi?
So I'm currently in an independent study with Professor Enton, but this was for my research project for the Mellon Transfer Student Program. So I decided to interview Naomi because I've actually known her for a little bit. And she told me about the work that she does, and it was just so interesting to me. She works with women who are mentally disabled, and she provides such incredible services for them. But I thought there was a lot for me to learn from her.
And Lena.
So my oral history project was a class shaping up the modern world with Professor Napoli. The assignment was to think of a historical event, a world-changing event, I guess, and find someone who lived through it, has a first-hand account of it, and a primary source. So I chose the Black Decade in Algeria in the 90s, and I interviewed 3 people, which was my mother, my grandfather, and my father. And I chose those 3 because they're relatives, I know them, but also they lived in Algeria during that time, and they provide each unique experiences, one of a young woman, one of a young man, and one of a patriarchal figure, a grandfather, an older figure who also lived under French colonialism and the Algerian Revolution. So I thought they were really wise figures for me to interview.
Ms. Moore, when Nadia came to you and said, that she wanted to interview you, what was your first response?
Why? Why did you want to interview me? And then she explained that she was doing this project with the professor, and that they needed somebody from the Caribbean. And then I decided, well, I'll do it.
Okay. And Naomi, what about you? When Dylan came and said he wanted to interview you for this class, what did you think?
I asked him if he was sure he wanted to interview me. And then, he explained the project he was doing. It sounded really cool. So I tried to give all of my experience best as I could.
And Lena, do you have your mom's response to that?
So it's from the computer, so I'll try and make sure everyone can hear, but I asked the question to my mom, and this is what she responded.
I was, at the moment, I felt very honored to be asked to be interviewed for something that's very close to my heart.
So she said she felt, if you couldn't hear, she felt honored, and she was proud to talk about something that was close to her heart.
Okay, so what was it, Nadia, what was it like doing that interview? I mean, obviously you live with your grandma, so you've obviously talked to her a lot, but what was it like to do the interview?
Actually, this was the second interview I've done with her because I've done it for another class, but it was a much shorter interview. And especially when we did the first one, it felt very rushed because we had to do it within a 10-minute time frame. But since we did it for longer this time, it was it was kind of interesting to hear how much my grandmother remembered from her childhood and remembered from the whole immigration process, and even what it was like to still live in the colonialized West Indies.
Naomi, what was it like for you? I'm sorry, Dylan, what was it like for you to do the interview?
It was like no other interview I'd done. We sat at a kitchen table and it was actually incredibly inviting. If you listen, the first thing that you hear is her dad offering me food. He goes, "Would you like something to eat?" And my words are, "No, I'm okay." And it was just actually very sweet. You know, she invited me into her home, and it was just like talking to a friend. But you know, in that conversation are things that to me are very profound, and to her are, you know, every day.
For example?
Well, for example, you know, it's like she tells me, yeah, it's just what I do. I go over to this home for women, and I help to take care of them, and I help, you know, them with religious services. I help them with their medications, things like that. I mean, to her, it's just what she does. You know, it's simple. To me, that's an incredibly profound way to take care of people in your community. You know, so things like that, I think, are why oral history is so powerful. You know, we're able to sort of tap into the power of work. You know, when it seems otherwise mundane.
Lena, so you interviewed 3 people, and they may have been different, but what was it like doing these interviews, and what surprised you?
Well, it was my first time ever even hearing of oral history. I mean, I got the best person to teach me about oral history, which is Professor Napoli, but it was, even though they were all my family members that I'm very close to, it was still awkward at first because we're talking about something that was very traumatic for them, terrorism, effects of settler colonialism in North Africa. You know, these are things where they saw bloodshed, they saw death, they saw things that nobody should live to see, and you know, I felt kind of ashamed to be in front of them, like listening to these stories. I felt like I didn't deserve to. But after I got used to it and I was doing more interviews, I learned how to be someone who's not taking their words, but it's like they're providing their words for me willingly, and that I should take that as like from an honored stance. So I felt proud of the work I was doing, but I did get really emotional sometimes because of things that they would tell me.
And Nadia, did I ask you? Was it like?
Yeah.
Okay. And what was the experience like for you, Ms. Moore?
Well, the experience was very life-changing, I should say, because I had to go back to all my younger days as a child. Think of all the things I did with my family, how I became a teacher, and my whole life changed after that. I got married, and then I migrated to this country, and I had to start life all over again. But when I came here, I decided I decided to educate myself, you know, and so I enrolled into college, and I got an associate degree in nursing. Then I went back while I had my children and got a bachelor's of science in nursing and improved myself as I go along. And then I transferred to another institution, and at that institution I became teaching the nurses how to operate with patients and so. And I also still increased my education by being certified in what I did. So I had to bring all of this together and, you know, think how far I came from. You know, leaving that small country where we had just come through colonialism and coming here and really making something for my greater, improving myself a lot more and having a lot of satisfaction when I look back I can look back at my life and see I did quite a lot for myself and my family.
So from saying, why me?
Right.
What happened over the course of that interview?
Right, but Nadia, she was surprised at some of the things I had to say, because you don't often talk about all of these things with your children, and then you have to think of yourself, and examine yourself and say, well, you didn't think that you could get so far, so it was very, it made me feel to give of myself, and when I speak about myself, she of herself too will see how much she can do to improve herself.
So what surprised you, Nadia? She said even you were surprised.
Because some of the details, like there was a part in the interview where I was asking her about like schooling in Trinidad, and she was saying that like some of the teachers, some of the priests in the church and stuff like that, they were appointed by Britain, so they didn't even have their own like certified priests and stuff from Trinidad. Most of them came over from England, and that was very surprising to me. And then also, free education, because that's one thing that we're striving for over here. And then also kind of like the whole process of the relationship between Indian Trinidadians and Black Trinidadians and her experience through that time.
And what about you, Naomi? What was the experience like for you, sitting around the table with your father serving food and everything like that?
I actually thought it would be not as almost hard as it was, just actually verbalizing what I do, because I've been doing it for years, so I just thought it would be so simple to give over, like what it entails and how I feel, and like I don't have really good questions prepared, but I guess I just wasn't, like I've never done that before. No one's really asked me further than like, oh, what do you do? Oh, you work here. And then that kind of is usually where the conversation ends. But I guess it really got me thinking, like his questions got me thinking about things I haven't thought of before, even though I've been working there for like over 2 years. So I think for me, the experience kind of made me like look at it from the side more than just being in it and doing it every day. Like Dylan says, like it's mundane. I kind of really more so understood what I was doing, and I guess, yeah, it was a little harder than I thought it would be. So, but it was good.
So, Lena, what did your mom say about what was with the experience of being interviewed? You may have to repeat it for us.
Okay. I'll play it.
It was like the first time I got interviewed, so at the beginning it was kind of weird, I'm gonna say, because being questioned and I have to answer, and also like kind of it brought me back to like 20 years back or more. So it was some like it took me places that I thought I would never go back, and I was a little bit nostalgic at that moment.
So she said it was kind of weird because it was the first time she's ever really been like formally interviewed, even though it's by her daughter. We still had to sit in front of each other, and I had to say, this is being recorded. And she was like, it felt really formal rather than just asking questions like, Mom, how was this? I had to say it as if I was like a real oral historian. So she said,
are an oral historian.
Well, I don't have a PhD, right? So, but she said it made her really nostalgic, and it brought her back to places that she thought she'd never have to visit again, like 20 years back in Algeria as a young girl. And she, after moving here, she thought she would never have to really go back there. But through the oral history, she kind of traveled back to Algeria to that time. And it brought back memories of joy, but it also brought back memories of pain for her.
So Nadia, you've done a couple of oral histories with your grandma, but what impacted this one, which is pretty, substantive have on you, either at the time or now looking back on it?
Well, part of the assignment was to connect it back to something that we learned in the class. So a couple of the things that we had learned was about Indian indentureship and colonialism and religion in Trinidad and like all of the West Indies. And for me, it was like the only person that I specifically knew that had lived through some of this stuff or knew more about some of this stuff was my grandmother. Because when I was, from the last interview, because that was also for a different type of immigration class, what I remember from the last interview was lining up the timelines of when my grandmother was in Trinidad and then when she came here, that it overlapped with Trinidad still being under British colonialization. So with that, I was like, okay, so I know that she's gonna be the best person for this type of discussion. Because like I have friends whose parents are also immigrants and stuff like that, but they haven't lived through the majority of it like how my grandmother has.
And Dylan, what impact did it have on you, either doing this interview either at the time or now looking back on it? Actually, it's not that long ago that you did it, but you did this substantive interview with Naomi. What kind of impact did it have on you, do you think?
It was one more part in what has been a continuous education from Professor Enton on how we can view history differently than we're taught, in high school. Something we talked about earlier actually is that if you look at history in the books that were given in high school, it's as though you could understand all of it from the viewpoint of 40 guys, that 40 people in all of history laid end to end built it, your Napoleons, Genghis Khan, etc. But of course there were people working under them who constructed the pyramids, the skyscrapers, people like Naomi who took care of their communities. And their viewpoint is equally or if not more important than these figureheads who led and who were taught most often to view as these gravitational forces in history where everything's focused around. And interviewing Naomi, as well as the other people that I've interviewed for my project, has given me a way of seeing history in a completely new manner, wherein everyone is a part of history, which sounds simple, but is actually kind of a profound idea compared to what we're taught. And the empathy that she gives to her community is important, and it is something that is happening everywhere. And to be able to hear one story from my friend about her taking care of women who need help is actually inspiring. It's giving me a new way and a new perspective to look at life and to look at history. So that's sort of the impact it's had.
And Lena, what impact did the experience doing these 3 interviews about this particular time period in Algeria have on you?
Well, it added more to my story as a first-generation American who has 2 Algerian parents. I'm really close to my Algerian identity. Like, I go there every year for long periods of time, so it tells me more about where I'm from people who actually lived through colonialism and through terrorism in the country. And I think I did the interview at a really good time in world events, because this interview was about the impact of settler colonialism. It was about the impact that it had on everyday people in global South states. And in a day where we're living and seeing genocide in the world, this is really important work. It's important to see, like, how did this happen in the past, and like, why are we letting it happen again? Like, when I interview my family members and they tell me that they see their neighbors with their heads cut off, or they see women getting raped in front of their fathers, it's like, how are we letting this happen again when we have people who are still living today and they can still remember that? Like, how are we, this timeline is so close. And so it had a really emotional impact on me, because it showed me for the power of oral history, because as you said, there's stuff that's not in the documents. There's stuff that you need to get from living people, and people may not see that as history because history has a connotation of the past. But I mean, memory is still of the past, and I mean, there's social memory, which maybe historians are not that fond of, but I think getting testimony from real people can tell you a lot about your present and what we can do to make a better future.
And Ms. Moore, especially since you wondered why Nadia wanted to interview Rich initially, then had a lot to say. So what kind of impact did doing that oral history have on you, either at the time or now thinking about it?
Well, it had a big impact on me because it allowed me to look at two worlds. Because coming from Trinidad and seeing what we did there, in Trinidad we came a long way too, because we came out from colonialism into independence. And we had a prime minister who did a lot of education. So in that, more people became educated. But coming here, then you could compare two different worlds, you know, because education is more available here. You know, like going to university in Trinidad at that time was a rare thing because we had one university and it was very difficult to get in. You know, so you just become whatever. Teachers are go to a certain college and they educate you in all the ins and outs of teaching, so you're certified. But here, you can more broadly educate yourself in whatever you want. And that makes a big difference. And this is why you have this big question with immigration and all of that. But people come here because there's so much more opportunities here. You know, as long as you take advantage of it, because I was able to educate myself. I started my master's program, but my husband got sick and then I had to, you know, take care of him. But education is very important. And coming here allowed me to do a lot more for myself and for my children. So that's the big difference. You know, you have to be taking advantage of what is available to you. And I had to look at myself and, you know, because she interviewed me, I was able to look at the difference. You know, there's a lot of things I can put together. Because she interviewed me, I was able to think more of what I had become.
And Naomi, what about you? What kind of impact did it have being interviewed, you know, never been interviewed before, right? Have on you either at the time or thinking about it?
It's actually very similar to what you said. Like, I've never looked at it from the side. I guess I just started and then got thrown into it. Like, the way when I started working there, there were like multiple trainings that we had to do. And then I never really thought about it from an interviewer's perspective. But once you're responding to the interviewer's questions, you're kind of also seeing it from their perspective, and it's like a completely different experience. The hardest part for me was like, I guess I'm very used to working there, but I've never really had to verbalize what I do, and so it was hard for me to do that for the first time while giving the people I work with the respect that they deserve, because they're also people, but also trying to give over realistically what I do, because I guess there's kind of a balance you have to keep, because I want to give an authentic response, but I also want to kind of like keep like certain things like respect this, because when I work there, it's like we talk to each, like the people I work with, we talk to each other like very like, we need help with this, and like you're going to say exactly what you need. But when you're speaking to someone who wants to learn about what you do, you have to use a very different tone and I guess express it very differently than you would in the workplace. So that was a very big mindset shift for me, because I've never done that before. But overall, I think it was a great experience for me to do this interview, actually. And it gave me a new appreciation for something I've been doing for so long. Kind of like renewed it for me. Yeah.
And Lena, what's your mom have to say to that question of the impact the experience had being interviewed on her?
I'll play it again and then I'll repeat it.
I felt like, you know, kind of happy and excited. And I thought the interviewer the impact that had on me, just like, I can tell our story. Our story could be taught here in America specifically, knowing that says not everybody knows what's going on in the other parts of countries, mainly the third world countries like Algeria and all that we went through. So I felt like, voices matter, and talking about what happened, even though some people don't know about it, it's something that's the impact that's got on me. Voilà.
So she said that she was happy that she got to tell her story, and she uses our story, so the collective, her family, Algerians as a whole, and she said that she thinks it's amazing that she can tell the story of Algerians and that it can be taught here in America, where maybe they don't know a lot about the suffering of third world countries like Algeria, and she said that she was just really honored that she got to give her voice, that she felt like her voice mattered, that what happened to her and her family was not for no reason, that it can be taught to future generations, it can be told to me, I can teach it to the class, I can move it forward, these stories, and so she felt really proud, honored, and really emotional after the interview, because no one, only her and her family, you don't really talk about it, the news doesn't talk about it, France doesn't talk about it, Algeria doesn't talk about it. Something she mentions in the interview is that in Algeria, they don't talk about the Black Decade anymore. It's kind of like a censored event. But here in America, she says that it's like a free place where you can share your opinion, your stories. So she was very happy that she did the interview.
Thank you, everybody. So, basically, because we're so proud of the work that our students have done, we invited one of the outstanding oral historians in New York City to come and respond to this panel and discuss the importance of the work our students do and oral history in general. Nyssa Chow is an oral historian, a multidisciplinary artist, a writer, and acting director of the Oral History Master's Program at Columbia University. She's been a visiting scholar at Princeton, Bard College, Fordham University, and Purchase College. Her oral histories have won many awards, and she's a graduate of Columbia University's MFA Film Program and Columbia University's Oral History Master's Program. So welcome.
I'm also Trini. Most important. Hello. Would you mind just giving me a second? Do we think we can? Oh, she's not on. This not on. All right. We'll do it without.
We can, yeah, you take your time.
Take a second.
Yeah, it's fine. No problem.
I have this magic
Okay,
device.
that's
Does it
good.
work?
Oh.
Just for one little thing at the end. Thank you so much for inviting me here, and also thank you to Joseph as well for bringing me into this space. It's very exciting. Thank you so much for being here as well. And what I love most about what I've been hearing here is the way that you brought the narrators into the space, which is a very rare thing to do, and it's very beautiful, and it's a really good teacher for me in the work that we're doing where I am as well. I missed the first half of this talk, but I was so glad I got to hear some of the stories from y'all and also from Trinidad, talking about, yeah, you sound just like my mother, talking about education and the importance of it. I recognized it right away, and I really responded to the things that you both shared about the way in which we are all part of history, which I'm actually going to talk a little bit about, and then also, yes, our heart is with Palestine, right? So I think I'm going to jump right in. I actually had a bit of trouble writing this today, and it's because actually Jessica told me to talk about oral history, but then also to bring in the current moment. And I suppose that became a little bit difficult because we know what the current moment is, and it felt a bit close to me, right? See, I have been an immigrant in this country for 26 years as an adult, which means I've been here longer than most of my students have been alive, right? And so, hello, fellow immigrants, here we are again in this moment. So, once again, we have Trump who's suggesting that there should be a class of people who can be American workers but not American people, right? That we can be workers but not necessarily people at all. And that is, of course, a status that we don't share alone as immigrants. They're incarcerated people who also live that reality. I was thinking about all of the things, right? The defunding of the ways in which the institutions that remember us, like these beautiful spaces. I was thinking about the ways in which the curriculum is trying to forget us, right? And then I realized I don't want to talk about that, actually, at all. I'm actually tired of talking about that because we know, right? We know. So I decided today that I'm not going to use my time here trying to prove that I'm a person or that we are people. We've already said Black Lives Matter, we said that, right? We already said Cisse Puede, we said that. If people, anyone who doesn't know doesn't want to know, but we know already, right? I was thinking about the ways in which I, just don't want to use this time to try to prove myself worthy to that particular gaze or by that standard, right? But I do want to name, because I want to talk today about memory and forgetting, the way in which supremacy is always a form of forgetting. That supremacy is a form of forgetting because it requires my erasure all the time. And so for this talk, I want to refuse that and refuse to forget the whole of me, and instead propose an antidote that might well be remembering the kind of work that we're all doing now, what it means to remember and what the power of that is, right? To choose to remember as an antidote to that kind of forgetting. So today I want to choose to remember that the form of oral history that I actually teach is but an infant in the arms of something so much older. That this thing that we talk about as oral history in these institutions is actually so very young, right? Oral history is old, it's older than all of us. And thinking of it that way immediately makes us a student of this much bigger thing. So I want to start and prime the room with that idea, right? So I want to talk about these older practices of oral history to think about what lessons they might teach us, right? What knowledges might they hold? What do they know about care and what form care may take in this moment? What do we need, right, in this way? And so I want to spend some time thinking about the ways in which oral history can be medicine. And maybe that's something an antidote for this moment of forgetting. So this semester, during one of the difficult weeks at Columbia, you might have heard of some of them, one of my students asked me a difficult question, right? We were talking about pedagogy and teaching. And he asked me, what do you think would be a good pedagogy for this moment? In other words, he asked me, what would a pedagogy at the end of the world look like? Oh my God. No pressure, right? And so I had to go think about that, and I have been. It was an excellent question. And I realized that now that I want to think about what does pedagogy as medicine look like? What would that look like for us, right? So and also who would our teachers be? And I think we have some answers here, right, on this panel. So I teach, in general, oral history as decolonial practice in intimate space. At least I hope that is what I'm teaching, is what I aim to do, right? And to understand this practice of listening that I teach, you have to understand where I locate the origin of my relationship with oral history. And that's actually in my childhood backyard in Trinidad, and it's in my grandmother's kitchen, right? The origin of my relationship to oral history is not from the university or from master's programs that I went to, right? It's not even from a reverence for the colonial archive, but it's from country people telling their stories, right? from communal ritual practices of revelry that we call carnival, right? From the music and hiding political consciousness inside reggae. You know, shout out to my Jamaican uncle and Bob Marley, right? In the refusals of like disobedient humor and satire as liberatory practice. It's memory practices, storytelling and parables that preserve remnants of language and archetypes from folklore, from territories and tribes we don't even remember, whose names we don't know, ancestry that we don't know the names of, right? That we can't trace. And yet those lessons were preserved. I'm talking to you about this older form of oral history because this form of oral history was not about documentation. It has something else for us, right? This form of oral history was always meant to preserve ways of being and ways of knowing in the world. It was oral history as a means of survivance and a memory keeper, like you said, for future generations. It was trying to do something else. It was meant to be inhabited by another, right? To be lived. So, you know, there are names for stars and gods that we're not taught in high school, but our grandmothers knew them, right? There are reasons why Sufis spin, or why, you know, black men in chain gangs in the South sang work songs to each other. That was oral history. You listen to the words. That was contraband knowledge, right? It was counter knowledge living inside this thing. There's reasons why Caribbean people, in times of trouble, go to the sea and commune in that space, right? There's all of these other ways that we know, these other practices. And these practices, and I call them orality or oral history practices, knew and know the subversive power of speaking and acting from our center, of naming our ground, right? Like we're on the unceded territory of the Linyapi people right now, right? You know, what it is to name that, what a power that is, right? Oral history practices doing something, a different kind of work, right? These are listening practices anew and how to precious our ancestors, our ordinary lives, and cosmologies that exceed what even institutional archives can contain, right? And as an antidote to supremacy's forgetting, I choose to remember that we carry worlds, that we have dreams that exceed the political imagination of policies, right? Imaginations enormous with possibilities and other ideas for a better world, right? To try to remember our own knowledges in this way, right? Hopes for our children that outlive the span of our own lives. We carry this in memory, right? The ways in which trying to remember that we archive all this, right? That we are archived already. There's a Palestinian poet named Mahmoud Darwish. I don't know if you've heard of him. He wrote a deceptively simple poem. It's just 2 lines. And it reads like this. Do you have any weapons on you? I have a longing that's killing me, right? And I'm choosing to remember to listen for our longings and not just our lack, right? That this is our engine, that this is our power. And so I'm inviting us all to choose a listening practice that attends to our desire and not just our circumstances of harm, right? And that there's a difference between pity and empathy. And pity and regard. I'm sorry, my bad, right? So I'm trying to speak from this center, and I hope you see what I'm doing, as an invitation for you to think about your own center and what that would sound like for you, right? An invitation to perform oral history's power of listening for and speaking from a place of embodied knowledge, right? Embodied knowledge is our particular expertise in the world, right? It asks, what does this body know because it is this body, right? What is legible to this body because it is this body, right? And what are we an archive for, and how does that allow us to read the world, right? And you know, at the heart of this, I think, is that question, you know, what if liberation actually begins within? Thinking about that in that time has been really powerful for me, right? I'm choosing also to remember that there's many different ways to think about time. That's another thing that these old oral histories can offer us. I'm going to talk about 2 different ways to think about time, and this won't be deeply heavy, I promise. One will be familiar to us, right? If I ask an American to point to the past, they'll go like this, right? This idea that we are the vanguard, and we sitting in this room in the present are the vanguard pushing forward, and past is behind us, and we are the forward movement like this. That's one way. Another way to think about time is actually to think of it as if it were a caravan snaking through the desert, and we are actually bringing up the rear, right? And so that the past is always in front of us. And when I asked my mom this question, where's the past? She said, like this, right? It's a different geography of time, right? And if we think about, the past as snaking in front of us, always in view, you can think about the past as not ever really being past, right? That we actually live in the present continuous of history. Something that Christina Sharp calls in the wake, right? That we live in the wake of this thing. And if we think about the past as something like this, always ahead of us, we can also see how slow and generational change is. And it can make some sense, right? Think about the muscular effort it would need to move history in a different direction for my little nephews who are actually behind me, right? In this way. And so this is an invitation from this form of oral history that's older for us to think about the ways in which the past is not past. To think about our lives as the present continuous of history. To think about a listening practice that listens for that present continuous, right? To listen for our lives in the wake, right? Need some water. I hope I'm not going to Trini fast. And this is the last one. I choose to remember, as an antidote to this forgetting, that we are nested stories, like Russian dolls. Right? This idea that this atomistic individual thing we call an individual is actually nested inside all of these other stories. So I am this individual inside the story of my family, inside the story of my child, my chosen family, right? Inside the story of my community, maybe my nation, maybe this big global history. For me, it's colonialism looms the largest, right? And then of course, outside, all around here, is all of those big ideologies and ideas. In other words, think of in what ways do you belong to the memory of gender or race, right? These much bigger ideas. That we are nested things, that we are relational things like this. And what can we do with that, right? Well, we can trace the origin story of who we are by thinking about the ways we exist in relationship to all of these different spheres, right? For example, if I asked you, in what ways do you belong to the story or the memory of America, you can see that the different way that you locate yourself in relationship to that would really profoundly change how you saw pretty much everything happening around the world right now, right? That our relationships of belonging to these different spheres is an inherent part of who we are, right? And to think of ourselves as that nested, as that enormous, can give us a way to do all of this listening work in another kind of way, right? To recognize the origin story of others, right? To understand how they interpret the world and how you're interpreting them, right? Is giving you access to a way to meet each other in another way. These older forms know this as well, right? They're fundamentally relational in the way that they push the world. So back to my original question, like how can this oral history practice be medicine for this moment, right? And how can this pedagogy be medicine? But that's my private question maybe, right? But how can grounding ourselves in the ways in which we belong to these different spheres of memory, right? Fortify us against the kind of forgetting that I think maybe this year is going to ask of us, right? Ask of everyone. Because forgetting is the disaster, or at least it would be, right? That forgetting is the true disaster, because my liberation is here, right? And so I'm going to ask you to just quietly to yourself. I want to ask you to do it out loud, although I do usually in the class do this. To maybe just think alongside me as I do a little exercise. And it's a simple one. I'm just going to think about the ways in which how am I in a relationship of memory to these different spheres, right? In what ways do you belong then to the story of colonialism or the global history to nation? In what ways do you belong to the story of your community, right? What do you remember that your community has forgotten, that your family has forgotten, and these kinds of questions, right? Because after all, memory is just the stories that we belong to or belong to us, right? So I'm going to do the first one and just locate yourself in a geography in relationship to it. Like, what would be the truth for you? So if I asked you in what ways you belong to the memory of global history, what comes to you, right? For me, what comes to me is that I am from the memory of revolutions, right? No surprise from where I've been talking now, right? right? I'm from the memory of decolonization and all of the movements that that brought with it. My mother passed that on to me loudly, right? In so many ways, right? If you think about what is your memory to nation, whether it's the nation you're living in now or the one you lived in before, right? And for me, I'm from the memory of independence, right? Green and young and yearning and fragile and all of the things that it was. That's a huge part of how I see the world as well. And what is it for you, right? I can think about community or culture, the bigger one, and I'm from the memory of carnival and dancing in the street, right? The way that the body itself becomes an archive for generations of dreaming in so many ways, right? I think about the ways how people who lost their language remember their stories, and it's with the body, right? Dancing their body, dancing these memories like phantom limbs, right? This ancestry, right? In these different ways. I can go down smaller and think about the street in Trinidad I lived, in my community in San Grande, which some Trinidadians might recognize what I mean by that. A little bit country, right? And I'm from the memory of we are because we are, and the susu, right? And the susu is a practice that women would put their meager monies together to make sure that all the children had school books and white shoe polish, right? It was a way of a reciprocal way of listening, a listening practice that is more like a union. If you think about the ways that unions use listening to bring people into relationship with their agency and to organize, right? And then, of course, I can go down smaller, and I'm in my backyard, and I'm from the memory of the smell of nutmeg and the sound of women laughing as they labor. And I'm just thinking again about joy as an agency and all the ways in which I belong to the memory of that, right? And now I'm in my, in the kitchen, and I'm from the memory of my mother and my aunt, chattering their little twin speak in their little corners there, right? And I'm also from the memory of women coming to whisper and cry with my grandmother, to spill all of their secrets, right, with her, and all the ways that women did all this communing. And then finally, I'll say that I'm from the memory of being small in the world but enormous to my single mother, and that one I don't have to explain to you. That one is all about care, right? And so I just wanted to bring to you this coming at oral history from another way, right? And thinking perhaps that this practice of oral history is the one that we might need in the coming months and years, right? A practice of listening that lets us hear ourselves in this way, right? Like an oral history practice of reworlding from the unworlding experience that this sometimes is, right, in these times. And a way to open a space of otherwise possibility in the meanwhile of emergency, right? Which is when many of these practices will go. Okay. I have a little thingamajiggy I can show you, but maybe I'll share it with you at another time. So that's it. I'm like early now. So thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So we wanted to come together for this day for two reasons. One is, number one, the 10th birthday of the Brooklyn College Listening Project. The other reason is that for the first time in 10 years, we finally have an archive that you can browse to look at 151 at this point and counting oral histories that students at Brooklyn College have done. Oh yeah, thank you very much. You enter it through our website, and France Alvarito is working on ways to establish our archive, who works in our library, to establish our archive so that you could enter it in lots of other ways, and it's permanent, and after all of us are gone, you'll still be able to go to this archive. And you can click on any of these oral histories, and I was just going to play a little bit of this one. This is an oral history that was done in Professor Enton's class by Mead Abdel-Gir, who interviewed Jean Chen in Professor Enton's class. So let me just play a little bit, because we haven't really heard any of the oral histories so far. But you can, as you can see, that you can go to, it not only has the audio file, but it has a transcription, so that you can follow along as somebody else, as they speak. So this is an interview with Jean Chen, who is a Panamanian student. So let's just hear a couple
My dad
of...
wasn't all that present in my life, which I can have recollections of. But when he did want to be in my life, he made the effort to like actively engage.
So, how would you describe your day-to-day life in childhood? Like, you saw your cousins frequently. You were the firstborn, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So then, like, what was it like living in Panama?
Living in Panama is very interesting, right? Because I lived in a little bit of a more of a poorer side of the city, and there was a lot of violence in that particular area. But the thing was, my mom, or our family, my mom's side, had, I guess, some form of, like, I don't know, status within that particular neighborhood because of my grandparents. And the criminals in the area knew not to mess with us. Okay. Like, that place was like a no-no zone. It was just off limits. You could think of it like as a demilitarized zone, essentially.
What was the status of your grandparents, and why did they feel like they couldn't mess with you guys?
My grandmother was a very caring woman. She gave food to pretty much the whole neighborhood. She invited people to her home. She actively, what's it called? She went out of her way to like try to prevent people from going into that lifestyle of crime. But even if they did, she wouldn't judge them for it. She would just welcome them in, but just no violence at her house. And because they respected them, it became a symbol in our neighborhood that that place was not to be messed with. So it came to the point that once my mom started living there alone with me, some of the criminals would tell my mom, hey, listen, you go to sleep tonight, calm down, nothing's gonna happen because we're watching your back.
Wow.
Like, we know you got a son, a young son, we respect your parents, we respect you, nothing's gonna happen.
So that's just a taste of this incredible archive that the 3 oral histories that are here are going to be in as well. This opens up a whole, for those of us who are not from Panama, who haven't experienced what he went through, we have a whole different understanding of both Panama, these people's lives, and as each of the people talked about, it gives us a sense of a different kind of history than you're going to read about in books. It's incredibly precious. So this archive could not have happened without the hard work of Colin McDonald, who's sitting right here, who provided the blood, sweat, tears, and technological expertise to make this possible after 10 years of collecting in external hard drives and on people's computers and all that, so that anybody, not just people at Brooklyn College, but somebody in California who makes their way to our library remotely can go, oh my God, I didn't know about this. I didn't know about what happened in Algeria, or this woman who's working to support her community, or what happened in Trinidad. This is so powerful. So thanks so much to Colin and to Miriam Deutsch, who guided the process, and who has been involved in the listening project from the very beginning. Unfortunately has the flu, otherwise she'd be here. And Franz Alvarillo, who is pushing forward with the listening project into the next decade. That's a birthday cake for the first decade, and we'll have a birthday cake for the next decade. So many people participated in creating the archive. Maddie Fox, who worked with the listening program for so long with her students, who added so much to it, with Miguel Macias, Naomi Schiller, Aliyah Ranjit-Singh, where is she? Chantilly, Justin Gallagher, and most important, the students and the interviewees who are at the heart of this incredible work. I also want to thank Gaston Alonso and Kiana Benjamin of the Wolf Institute that helped us have this celebration, and Elena Anapina and Ruby Chang of the New Media Center, who are videotaping us as we stand here. So in any case, I'd like everybody who's been involved to maybe get a picture around our birthday cake and then get a piece. This is Junior's cheesecake. So this is pure Brooklyn. So we all can share some, and in any case, thank you so much for coming. So we want to get a picture around the birthday cake. Does everybody have a camera on here? I'll take one. Okay. So let's stand up. Everybody come up and who are part of this.
All of our panelists.
Yes, absolutely. You want to move in front of me? I'm going to turn off.
Should we stand in front of this table?
Yeah, come around so that you're not in the back. Joseph, come in this center.
There you go.
You can hold the birthday.
Okay. I'm happy to take it.
Nyssa, you should be in one of the pictures too. Oh, I'm the most experienced person here.
All right.